about 3 to 4 years ago when I decided to pursue my doctoral degree at Nova Southeastern University. And specifically, I was not only working on my dissertation, but I was working on my newest book called R.E.D Leadership: How to Retain, Engage, and Develop Culturally Diverse Leaders of the Emerging Workforce. And in addition to that, another thing that I decided to do is I decided that I was going to do what I call a market survey. In essence, I was going to do a quantitative research survey to find out how can we become more effective at retaining and engaging and developing more culturally diverse members of the millennial and Gen Z generation. In essence, at the beginning of 2020, I set out on this journey. I said, I want to get 1,000, and I want to find out what are some workplace trends. What are some solutions that we can gather out of the data? What are some things that can be eye-opening and insightful, not only to help our organization, but to help other people thrive and succeed in this area as well? And there were really 3 reasons why I did it. The first reason why I did it is because, number one, I want to do more research as it relates to the cultural demographic of millennials and Gen Z. In essence, when I was doing my dissertation program, I did a lot of research, not only on different generations, but specifically millennials. And one of the things that I discovered, it was really challenging for me to find specific research that really dealt with the culturally diverse aspect of the millennials and Gen Z. And I thought this was really important because, again, when you look at the data, according to Nielsen, literally approximately 43% of those that are part of the millennial generation, those from 1977 to 1994, are actually from a culturally diverse background. The second thing I realized with Gen Z, it's actually almost 50%. And so because these two generations are so culturally diverse, I want to dig a little deeper to just get a little more insight as it relates to this retention, engagement, and development of this emerging workforce. The second reason why I did it because I had curiosity. I'm a very curious person. I love to learn. I love to ask questions. I love to learn new things. I always can call myself an individual that's a lifelong learner. Never stop learning, never stop investigating, never stop learning new things. And so I was just really curious. I was curious what was going on. I was curious about the trends with COVID-19 and the pandemic and all the social justice challenges that we're facing as a nation, or really that as a world. I wanted to find out, what's happening, what's going on. I want to get a pulse on what was happening. And the third reason why I did it is because I wanted to develop what I call a solution. I wanted to develop a solution to a problem that I have found is affecting organizations, companies, and institutions all across the country. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've read articles on LinkedIn. I've even read books, and I saw research, and I saw a variety of people that are trying to figure out how can we be more effective at retaining, engaging, and developing more culturally diverse leaders of these two emerging generations. I mean, I just continue to see it. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to do some research in addition to my dissertation, in addition to my book, and I want to uncover some of the trends. I want to go a little deeper into the data, and I want to uncover what are some things we can extract that can ultimately enable us to be more effective at solving this problem. Because one thing I know for sure, any challenge, any obstacle, any problem, there's always a solution. And really, that's what it was about. And so I engaged in this journey, and I was on this research journey for the entire year, in addition to all the other things that I was doing. And thankfully, I was able to connect with 700 plus culturally diverse members of the millennial and Gen Z generation. In essence, if you were to look at my data, you would find out that, number one, 69% of participants were part of Generation Z, those from 1995 to 2010. Another 31% were from the millennial generation, those again from 1977 to 1994. 70% identified as women and 30% identified as men. 11% were Asian Pacific Islander, 28% were Black, 26% were Hispanic, and then 36% were white. And then when it came from a national perspective all across the nation, approximately 38% were from the West Coast, 35% from the East Coast, 14% from the Midwest, and then 13% from the Southeast. So when I did this quantitative study, I dealt with a lot of different people, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different genders, and people from all across the country. And I was really excited about that because I really wanted to make sure that my study, that my research questions were really diverse, got a variety of different communities, a lot of different individuals, and I was able to accomplish that. And that was amazing because it led me to my next step, which is ultimately analyzing the data and asking myself a series of questions. What were the number one trends that I was able to identify, or the number one things I was able to identify with my questions? And then number two, how can I use this to empower people to become more effective at retaining, engaging, and developing more culturally diverse leaders of this emerging generation? And that's just, at the end of the day, the purpose of this session is going to be really simple. What I'm getting ready to do is I'm going to present to you a set of questions that were asked in this quantitative study. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain how we can use the data in order to be more effective at retaining, engaging, and developing culturally diverse leaders of these two emerging generations, not only within our culture and society, but also our workforce as well. And so this is where we're getting ready to go. And so I'm super excited to get into these questions. But before I do get started, just want to make sure that you're with me. If you're with me, you give me a big high five in the chat box. Give me a big high five in comments, wherever you are. I just want to make sure that you are with me. If I can see some high fives real quick, if I can see some fist bumps, if you can do that, or just a standard, hey, I'm with you, that would be awesome. Thank you so much, Benny. Let's go, let's go. Let's go. Thank you so much for those that are commenting. Hey, Matthew, great to see you. I appreciate it. So we're getting ready to move into this firstly correct. The number one most important thing, according to my study, that millennials and members of Gen Z are looking for is opportunity for growth. They're looking for an experience where they can grow, where they have more opportunity, where they have professional development. Number two, workplace culture, an inclusive culture, a culture that listens, a culture that gives people a voice, a culture that wants the best. And then number three, of course, everyone wants to get paid. Everyone wants to make the money, 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 money. So number three was money. So congratulations to those who were participating in the poll for getting it correct. Now, when I looked at this, there was a couple things that really stood out to me. And the first thing that stood out to me is this is absolutely opportunity for growth. If you're going to retain, if you're going to engage and develop the next generation of culturally diverse leaders, you got to create opportunity for growth. There has to be opportunity. There has to be professional development. But the other thing that really stood out to me is the workplace culture. In various circles or in my book, I call it an inclusive winning culture. In essence, if we're going to retain, if we're going to engage and develop the next generation of leaders, not only is growth important, but also the workplace culture. And one of the reasons I think this is so important is because one of the things I've learned is this, is that you can have diverse representation, but if the culture is toxic, if the culture is not inclusive, if the culture is not a positive culture, the diverse representation will not matter. This is one of the reasons why you can see a variety of people talk about how they could be in a C-suite position, or they could be a vice president, or maybe they're an entry level, or maybe they're a mid-level manager or leader, and there's diverse representation, but they're still frustrated, they're still agitated, they're still complaining, they still don't have a sense of belonging, because although there's diverse representation, if the culture is not right, it affects. I have a good friend of mine that actually worked at EA Sports. They were senior diversity program manager. And one of the things they said was really powerful. In an article that I was reading, or a post, they said, and I quote, they said, the power of having diverse representation within the workplace will not be effective if the culture that these individuals are working for are not inclusive. In that sense, she really just affirmed what I was already seeing. We can be diverse. We can actually check the box. But if the culture is toxic, if the culture is not right, ultimately it's going to have an effect not only on the individuals, but it's also going to have an effect on our retention. It's going to have an effect on our engagement, and it's going to have an effect on the development of culturally diverse leaders. And I want to show you a fascinating study as I was preparing for this that was really interesting. There was actually a study, I call it the Gardner Study. And one of the things they wanted to discover is they literally interviewed 113 HR leaders from a variety of different companies. And one of the things they discovered, watch this now, they said 88%, that's a huge number, 88% of these HR leaders said they're having a challenging experience at getting more diverse representation. In essence, with all these HR leaders, almost 100% of them are saying they're having a challenge. So this consulting group went in and they began to do some investigation. And there were 3 reasons why they found that challenge. The first reason why is it had an unclear path to leadership. In essence, people were getting jobs, people were getting hired, but there was no career map. There was no conversation the next 3 to 5 years. Where do you see yourself? There was no talk about one day you're going to be a leader, one day you're going to grow. In that sense, that wasn't even a conversation. It's just you have the job and be happy. But again, remember, is there opportunity for growth? Because there's no opportunity for growth, why am I going to stay here when I know there's other places where I can grow? The second thing that was interesting is a lack of exposure to leadership. In essence, a lack of exposure. People didn't even know who this person was. People didn't know the work that they were doing. People weren't exposed to the strengths, to the talents. I would even go so far to say, although it did not say it, maybe they didn't have a voice. Maybe they weren't being heard. Maybe people didn't even pay them no mind because they couldn't actually see the greatness that was sitting right in front of them. The third thing was a lack of mentorship. I think this is so critically important. To start a new job, to start a career, but have no mentors, have no guidance, have no sponsors. And these were a few of the reasons why the consultants who did this study felt that these HR leaders are having a difficult time as it related to diverse representation. And as I was reading this study and I was thinking about the study that I did and I was thinking about the book and I was thinking about the dissertation, there are really 3 things that really just jumped out to me that I think are so incredibly important if we're going to be more effective at retaining, engaging, and developing more culturally diverse millennials and members of Gen Z. The first is this, and this is so clear. We have to create growth opportunities. Again, create. We can't wait for them to ask. We have to be intentional. And this is important. I'll never forget when I was having a conversation with an African-American woman that worked for a major agency in Hollywood. And one of the things she shared with me, she said a lot of times within our culture, we're not so quick to speak up or to ask for opportunity. So it can be possible that you're gifted, that you have ability, but you never open your mouth. And there's a variety of reasons why people won't ask for the promotion. There's a variety of reasons why people won't ask to get the opportunity. And that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But because this is a reality in certain situations, as leaders, we have to be intentional at creating these opportunities, intentional at giving more tasks, intentional at creating mentorships, intentional at doing things that are going to present growth opportunities for this emerging workforce within our organizations, our companies, and our institutions. The second thing is developing an inclusive workplace. Again, this is a training in itself. What are the attributes of an inclusive workplace? And again, this can take months, this can take years. But again, if we're going to strive towards retaining more, developing more, and engaging more of our culturally diverse millennials and Gen Zs, we have to be committed. We have to be advocates of creating what I call this inclusive workplace, a place where people have a voice, a place where people are heard, a place where people are not tolerated, but they're actually celebrated, a place where the culture is so good that when they leave this culture, they're actually better. Again, when we deal with this inclusive workplace, there's so much to can talk about, but these are just some of the things we got to consider. And the last thing is strong leadership development programs. I'm going to talk a lot about leadership, as you would imagine. We're going to create strong leadership development programs. And again, when I do videos, I've talked about this a lot, and I want to talk about it again. When we're dealing with leadership development programs, not only do we need these lectures and these virtual programs and speakers, and all that stuff is important. But in addition, we need coaching, where there's coaching, where there's feedback, where we're guiding, and we're not only giving them information, but we're giving them the understanding on how to actually apply the information. And then we're giving them the opportunity to use the information, and that's experiential. So in essence, when I deal with the leadership development program, we got to have the information, we got to have the teaching, we got to have the empowerment, we got to have the speakers, we got to have the lectures, but it doesn't stop there. We still need the mentorship. We still need the coaching. And the last thing that we need the opportunity. Are we given an opportunity to use what we have actually learned? I don't know about you, but I've been in places before where I've been a part of an organization, and I went to great conferences, and I've had great professional development programs, and it really helped me do my job better. I never got the opportunity to really take that to the next level, to do those tasks that challenged me, that brought me outside my comfort zone, that my supervisor was willing for me to fail because the supervisor understood that failure is actually a preparation for success. And sometimes you have to fail before you can actually succeed. And these are the kind of things we got to consider if we're going to be effective at retaining, engaging, and developing more culturally diverse leaders of these emerging generations. And I want to share a story with you right now. This is a picture of my wife, and she's watching right now. But this is a picture of my wife, and she's an HR professional. And so we have a variety of conversations that revolve around retention, engagement, and leadership and talent development. Because as you know, in the HR world, this is one of their areas of expertise. And one of the things we talk about is we talk about how there are organizations, or even there are companies that are not effective at onboarding. You know, you get the job and you don't have effective onboarding, you don't have mentorship, there's no conversation about how they see you in the future. It's just you get the job, you're thrown in there, figure it out. Now again, I understand there are generations that grew up like that. But one of the things that I've discovered is when you just throw someone into a job, when you just throw them into an organization, they have no history about the culture. They have no idea really about the vision. They're just doing a job. They're just there at 9. They're gone at 6. They're just doing a job. When you do that, you're not going to get great production. You're not going to get the motivation, the engagement, and the desire to stay. You say, Dr. J, why? Well, because number one, in order for me to thrive, in order for me to do well, there's certain things I got to be aware of when I come into a new job or come into an organization. But number two, if you're not going to take time to really develop me, to help me thrive, to help me succeed, or to help me get better, if you're not going to invest in me, why is someone really going to invest in you? Again, you can say they're selfish because they're already paying them and they're getting the job done. But again, I don't just want someone to get the job done. I want someone to excel. I want someone to be exceptional. I want someone to do their role or do their job really, really well. But again, in order for this to happen, we also, as leaders, as members of an organization, have to do our part to ensure that we're investing and we're doing the things necessary in order for that person to flourish and in order for that person to do well. As I said earlier, and I'll say it again, if we're going to be effective at retaining, engaging, and developing the next generation of culturally diverse millennials and members of Gen Z. Number one, we got to be intentional about creating growth opportunities. Number two, we got to be intentional about developing an inclusive, and I like to say a winning workplace. And number three, we got to be intentional about creating robust leadership development programs. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but these are the three things that I think are so critically important as I observe and I begin to think about the responses to the So according to our group that participated in the poll, the number one was leadership skills. Number two was interpersonal skills. And number three was communication skills. So the group that participated in this poll, you got 2 out of 3, but the actually number one skill, according to my study, was leadership development skills. That was the number one skill that I was able to identify that members of my group wanted to improve upon. Number two was management. And then number three was communication skills. Now, when I looked at this and I looked at this question, I looked at the responses, the first thing that came to my mind was not only do these young, bright, incredible future leaders care about leadership, but more importantly, they desire to grow in leadership as well. In essence, when we think about these young men and women from all walks of life, from different cultural backgrounds, not only do they believe in leadership, but here's the critical one. They actually want to develop as leaders. They want to make an impact in the world. They want to make a difference. They want to develop these skill sets. But here's the challenge. The challenge is this, is in order for us to really empower this next generation, in order for us to ultimately enable them to develop into future leaders, there's 4 things we got to be aware of. Number one, we got to have a heart to develop culturally diverse leaders. In that sense, I love what Benny said. We have to be intentional about creating leadership programs that are open to all. Again, I'm a speaker. I travel a lot in the college market. And it's amazing to me that I've come to leadership programs. And again, this is no shade at all, but I saw them and I saw very few culturally diverse people involved. And I look across the campus like there's got to be more than this. And sometimes we got to be intentional. Sometimes we got to step out our comfort zone. Sometimes we got to go places we normally wouldn't go in order to get this great talent and these great leaders involved with our programs. But it's not going to happen until first we actually care and we have a heart to be intentional in this area. Number two, and I talked about it earlier, we got to develop what I call a robust leadership program. And I talked about this in a little bit in the first question. We got to make sure that not only are we developing leadership development programs, but we got to make sure that they're getting the coaching, the mentoring, the professional development, and then the actual experience. You know, one of the things I would love to see on college campuses all across the country is where leadership programs are not just done out of the student activities or the leadership studies or leadership development office, but literally out of the Office of Multicultural Affairs, out of our diverse DEI departments. I think leadership development should be there as well, an expert in that area. It's so important that we're developing leadership programs for our culturally diverse students or even our professionals, and we're not depending on others that may not have a heart for them to do it for them. And I'm going to say it again. Unfortunately, you will have people that are over leadership development programs, and all they're concerned about is just developing leaders that look like them. They have no heart for people that are different from them. They have no heart for people from different cultural backgrounds. And as those that have responsibilities of serving culturally diverse students and professionals, we need to take more of a responsibility of creating leadership programs for our people. Now, someone's saying, Dr. J, that's a lot of work. I know, but to develop the next generation of leaders is going to take a lot of work. That's part of servant leadership. That's part of what it means to be a leader. We make sacrifices for the next generation. And I know there's a lot of people in higher ed that are here today, and you're already making sacrifices, and you're already going the extra mile. So again, there's no shade towards you at all, and others that are watching me, you're already going the extra mile. But I just want to reiterate, when you get to that point, myself included, man, I don't feel like doing this. I don't feel like going the extra mile. I'm tired. Hello. I get like this. I got a heart, but I'm tired. At that point, remember, sometimes when I'm tired is when I really got to push because it positioned me for the greatest impact. Now, again, I'm not saying we need self-care. We need to take care of ourselves. That's important. But sometimes you got to push yourself in order to empower the next generation. The next thing is create what I call growth conversations. What a growth conversation where you just have conversations. Where do you see yourself in the future? What do you see yourself doing? Have you ever had that conversation with maybe someone that you're leading, maybe someone that you're supervising, not just doing the job that you hired them for, but what do you see yourself doing? Where do you see yourself in the future? You want to begin to project that. Sometimes you got to have that conversation because sometimes people don't see that in themselves. I don't know about you, but I have friends that have been able to see something in me that I didn't see in myself. I didn't see myself doing certain things. I didn't see myself speaking at a certain level. I didn't see myself making an impact over here. And I'm sure many of us here today have been in that position. It took someone to see in you what you didn't see in yourself. Again, these are growth conversations and moments. And the last thing is we got to remove the barriers that impact the development. This is good, right? We have to remove the barriers that impact development. You say, what do you mean, Dr. J? Well, what I mean is I was reading an article in Harvard Business Review, and they were talking about developing diverse talent, diverse leadership. And there was a writer that said something that was so powerful. The writer said, certain employees are given a highway, a clear path to leadership opportunities, while there are others that have roadblocks that are stopping them from getting into leadership opportunities. Now, again, if you're like me, you understand exactly what this individual is saying because you've worked for organizations or you've worked for companies or you've worked for institutions and you saw certain people go from boom to there. There was no work, there was no sacrifice. It was just nepotism and a variety of other things that got them from point A to point D. But then you're working hard, you're going the extra mile, and you're facing this challenge, you're facing this challenge, you're facing this challenge. And here comes the thing that's so frustrating. You made one mistake, and they want to write you off. Just one. 99% of the time, you've done well, but one mistake, we can't trust them. We can't put them into a leadership position. These are the barriers that we have to be aware of and that we have to deconstruct if we're going to open up more opportunities for culturally diverse leaders and professionals of the emerging generation. And there was actually a fascinating study that I came across. It's the Management Leaders of Tomorrow organization. It's an incredible organization. I encourage people to connect with them. I believe John Rice is the CEO on LinkedIn. I encourage you to connect with them. But they did a study. And one of the things they wanted to discover as I was reading this study is they wanted to figure out what was holding culturally diverse professionals from actually growing, evolving into getting into leadership positions. And so they found out they came from great institutions, they had great GPAs, all the standards up, they had all that. But once they started the job, all of a sudden, things begin to change. As they looked deeper into these individuals' lives and into their career, they had conversations. They discovered the first challenge was a lack of sense of belonging. In essence, a lack of support, a lack of encouragement, a lack of feeling as if people want you there. They're excited you're there. They found this lack of sense of belonging was huge. Second thing, so important, a lack of proper skills training. What do you mean? A lack of EQ, a lack of organizational awareness, a lack of social awareness, a lack of understanding the politics, how to navigate, how to build relationships, how to do certain things within the organization. Because one of the things they discovered is in their particular study, they discovered that a lot of their culturally diverse professionals were also first generation students. So not only were they the first in their family to have the job, this is a first time experience. And that creates a whole set of challenges. But if you don't have the skills, if you don't have the training, if you're not enabling students or professionals to navigate these challenges they never saw, it's going to be more difficult for them to actually matriculate through the organization. And again, this is why we got to be intentional about our training and intentional about our leadership development training. And again, why we got to make sure we have a heart for culturally diverse students, because again, we can't put this all into one box. There are people with different challenges and different experiences and different ways of doing these stuff they're not even aware of. And if we don't do our part to educate, to provide mentorship, to provide guidance and training about what I like to call the unwritten rules, it's going to hinder the leadership development. And the last thing is coaching and feedback. And again, that's mentorship. That's just being there to coach. That's being there to help. That's being there to keep people accountable. Now, again, it seems so simple. So simple. But yet I would bet maybe there's someone here today watching, or maybe you know someone that would say, I have the ability to lead. I have the talent to lead. As a matter of fact, my director is intimidated in me because of what I possess. But yet there's no opportunity. There's no growth. And I'm frustrated because I don't feel like I'm appreciated. I don't have a sense of belonging. Maybe I haven't been given the opportunity, or maybe I'm not given the mentorship that is needed or the relationships that are needed in order to go to the next level. It's one of the things I discovered in study. It was so eye-opening and so powerful. And so what I learned from this is this: we're going to change the narrative. We're going to create retention. We're going to create more engagement. But more importantly, was my passion. If we're going to create more culturally diverse leaders of these emerging professionals within our workforce, there's 4 things that we got to be advocates for, and we got to make sure others are advocates for. Number 1, do you have a heart to develop culturally diverse leaders? Begin with the heart. Do you have a heart? Number 2, are there some barriers that you see that can be removed? I promise you there's some barriers. But what are those barriers, and how can you remove them to create more access and more opportunity? The third one is leadership development program. We've talked about that. And again, not just the right components, but the right skills. Oh, it's so important. The right skills. Can I go a step farther for those that are responsible for DE&I? There are certain skills that the people we serve must be aware of. Vice versa, there's other skills that others must be aware of. We have to be able to understand how to incorporate that into our leadership development programs. And the last thing, and again, I just added on because I think people have to know you care. I love what John Maxwell says. He says, people will not listen to you until they know how much you care. One of the stories I love to share with people when I come across this concept of opportunity and mentorship and access is several years ago when I just graduated college, I had a chance to work on what I call the Wayne Brady Show. I'm not sure if you remember the Wayne Brady Show, but it was back in 2003, 2004. I was fresh out of college. And I'll never forget when I worked on this show, I had a lot of experience. I had been producing a talk show ever since I was a sophomore in college. I had had multiple internships. I mean, I had been a production assistant literally ever since I was a junior in college. I had vast experience when it came to television. So I got this entry-level job as a production assistant, and there were some other people that worked with me as well, and they were of another culture. And I remember a couple of them were receptionists. One was actually an intern before they got the job. As I went through the process of working for this show, what was so amazing to me is although I was qualified, I had all the skill set, I was continuing to be looked over for promotions. Anytime a promotion came up, they looked over me. They looked over me. They looked over me. And I remember it was amazing to me because ultimately what happened is I actually started getting bored because there was no growth. There was no opportunity. And when you are getting looked over, when you know you're gifted, when you know you're talented, when the person you trained is actually getting a promotion before you actually get a promotion, you start to feel a certain type of way. Oh, I also want to tell you, I was the only man of color as a production assistant at the job. I've got to tell you that one as well. And so all these thoughts are going through my mind because not only am I bored, not only am I disengaged, not only am I frustrated, but quite frankly, I cannot wait till the season ends because I'm looking for new opportunities. And can I suggest to you that there are certain people now they call it the Great Awakening? And the reason why there's the Great Awakening is because people have been overlooked. People are bored with their job because they're not given opportunity. They're not in line with their passion. The reason this is happening is because of these simple things that I was experiencing. And I remember the month of February, the show got canceled. I remember everyone was sad. I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't sad at all. You say, Dr. J, why weren't you? I wasn't sad because I knew that I was already planning to go to another place. But what's so interesting is because my attitude was still positive, because I had a joyous attitude, my boss wasn't willing to give me a promotion, but he was willing to fire me because of my attitude. Now, again, I ended up getting my job back because I sent the thank you letter, and that's a whole nother story. And come to find out, they realized what the boss did was absolutely wrong, and I got my job back. So the boss tried to paint me in a negative picture, when in reality, the reason I was in that position is because the boss wasn't doing their job the entire time. And I suggest to you that a lot of our organizations, a lot of our companies that are dealing with employees and professionals that are disgruntled, that are disengaged, that are poor, that are agitated, it's not always them. Because leadership or the culture hasn't done their job in empowering them, giving them opportunities, investing, and letting them know that we desire for you to thrive and we're going to create opportunity. This is one of the reasons. And until that's fixed, the problem is going to continue to go in a cycle, in a cycle, in a cycle, and in a cycle. And so, as I said earlier, the four things: number one, we got to have a heart to develop culturally diverse leaders. Number two, we got to remove the barriers. It's a whole conversation. Number three, leadership development program. Number four, we got to let people know that we actually care. Awesome. Time is up. So according to this poll, number one was an established culture and support system. Number two was placing people in their strength. And then number three, tied was leadership and passion. Okay, awesome. Now, again, when I did my dissertation, I actually identified these as 5 key aspects to be considered when it came to retention. But in my survey, the number one thing was passion alignment. Can you believe it? The number one thing that was most important to those that participated in my particular study was passion alignment. Number two, as many of you said, was a culture and support system. And then number three was a leadership team or a supervisor. Now, we talked about the cultural work, we talked about the inclusive workplace, what I like to call a support system. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership in the next question, but I want to focus here on passion. What was so eye-opening to me is that what was most important when it came to retention was this concept of passion alignment. In essence, what members or participants of my study desired is they want to be in a place where their passion is actually aligned with what they are doing. This is a really important concept because what it tells us is this. And if I'm going to retain, if I'm going to engage, if I'm going to develop more culturally diverse leaders of the emerging generation, not only is it important to have the right cultural, right workplace, not only is leadership important, we've talked about, not only is opportunity important, but now is there a passion alignment with what they're doing? In essence, is with what they are doing in the workplace aligned with their inner passion, or what I like to sometimes call, or what Simon Sinek says, your why. Is the why connected to the job? I love this quote, and watch what it says. If you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for money. But if they believe what you believe, ultimately they'll work with blood, sweat, and tears. When people's passion is in alignment with their work, they will go the extra mile. When a person's passion is in alignment with what they do, they're going to be engaged. They're going to produce more. They're going to have more productivity. They're just going to do things you never, ever imagined. It's one of the reasons why I love what an individual talks about now, and I share it all the time. He used a concept called meaningful work. That people are not just looking for work. Quite frankly, people aren't just looking for money. They're looking for meaning. They're looking for impact. They're looking for work that actually matters. And this actually goes back to a variety of studies for several years on millennials, that 80% in one study desire to make an impact in the world. When you deal with Gen Z, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, social justice causes, causes of homelessness and eradicating racism, this matters. And if your company's not behind stuff that they're passionate about, they're probably going to see it as a job. They're probably going to see it as a stepping stone. They're definitely not going to be all the way engaged if there's no passion alignment. So ultimately, if I'm going to retain, if I'm going to engage, more importantly, if I'm going to develop the next generation of culturally diverse students or leaders or professionals, I got to make sure there's passion alignment. Now, when I saw this, I said, well, how can we implement this into the workplace? And there's a fascinating thing that I came across in my dissertation. It's called the Volunteers Function Inventory. The Volunteers Function Inventory. And ultimately, what the Volunteers Function Inventory is it's a survey that those who are responsible for volunteers would give to their volunteers. And ultimately, it would identify what they're passionate about, what they care about, what matters most to them. Because anytime someone volunteers, they volunteer for a reason. Something strikes a chord, something connects with their passion. So when I'm volunteering, most of the time I'm volunteering for a reason. And so they would administer this survey. And then once they identify the passion, they would create the role or the job around the passion. And ultimately what they discovered that their volunteers not only were more engaged, not only were more productive, here it comes, but they actually had greater retention. So if you're here today and you're saying, well, how can we increase retention? How can we increase engagement? One of the key components is passion alignment. Creating a survey, creating a set of questions where you can identify what the individual's passion is, and then connecting that passion to the work in which they do. And if you can do that, it'll make a huge difference. The unfortunate thing is so many times when we have organizations or we have our companies, we just give people jobs. And they're good at the job, but they're not passionate about the job. I'll say it again. They're good at the job, but they're not passionate. People that are good at the job, but are not passionate, are not going to be engaged. They're actually going to probably get bored and they're going to leave. But people that are good and passionate at what they do, those are the ones that you want. So I'm not only looking for your skill set, I also want to know, is it connected to your why? Is it connected to your passion? So you say, Dr. J, well, how do I implement this? I'm a supervisor. How do I implement this concept? I'm going to tell you how to. Number one, you got to do what I call it a passion identifier survey. That's what I'm going to call it, like a passion identifier survey. And it's a set of questions to find out what the person is most passionate about within your organization. Maybe it's the mission. Maybe it's the vision. Maybe it's the task. Maybe it's the people. Maybe it's the opportunities. I don't know. But you want to discover what that is. And once you uncover that, within the job design, within the responsibilities, within the things that people need to get done, connect passion to that. So for instance, maybe someone says, you know what? I like to give back to my community. Okay, I'm going to have you do the job, but I offer moments where you can also go back into the community and we're going to pay you to give back. Maybe someone is passionate about a particular organization. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. You're going to do your job, but I'm going to give you opportunities not only to give back, but I'm also going to match the finances that you give to your organization. Again, these are just a couple of things that you can do. There are so many things that you can do. But what I do know is this. If the skill set is in connection with the passion, they're going to be engaged, they're going to be retained, and I'm almost so sure to say at some point they're going to develop into leaders and advocates for what you're trying to do. Third thing you got to do is what I call a bi-yearly conversation. What does that mean? That means a conversation. How are you feeling? How is everything? What can we do to serve? What can we do to make you better? I think if there's any conversation that needs to be had right now is how are you dealing with COVID-19? How do you feel about coming back? Where's your motivation? Where's your engagement? Instead of putting demand on people, what can we do to ensure that you're in a position to thrive, to succeed, and just feel good about life? These are some of the things we can do in order to ensure that I like to say we have what I call passion alignment. And again, this is not just something that I came up with in theory and through research. Actually, this is a real life experience. This is a picture of me at our 2019 Circle of Change leadership experience in LA. And it was the last in-person event that we've ever done. And hopefully in 2022, we'll begin to come back in person. This fall, we're doing our virtual one more time, and hopefully things get better, but we will see. But what's so fascinating about this organization is it's volunteer based. We don't make the money that is needed to really pay people. I mean, we pay people, but it's not like, salaries and organizations. Literally, probably 80% of our team is volunteer based. And if they are getting paid, I mean, it's not that much, right? And the question goes, how can people be so motivated? How can people just want to be a part of this program? Why are so many speakers giving their time to give back? The reason being is not only because I think it's an incredible vision, but we've tapped into people's passion. We tapped into people that want to make a difference. We tapped into people that want to change lives. We tapped into people that believe in the vision, believe in what it's doing. But not only that, we do our best to put them in the position where they can thrive and where they're excited. I think the same is true with our organizations. We're going to have more increase in retention, engagement, and development of more leaders. Then, as I said earlier, number one, develop a passion identifier survey. Number two, create the role or job design around that passion to the best of your ability. And then number three, engage in bi-yearly or every 6 months, maybe every quarter conversations. How are you feeling? How's that passion? How's that fire? Because one of the things I've learned sometimes, you gotta light that match again. You gotta stir that fire up again. This is the next thing that I think is so important if we're going to be more effective at retaining, engaging, and developing more culturally diverse leaders of the millennial and Gen Z generation. Now, before we move on, tie for second. 43% of people said bad leadership. 43% said lack of professional growth. And then some said pay or salary. Obviously, you're really correct. Number one, obviously, was bad leadership. And number two was lack of professional growth. We talked about that, but I'm going to go a little deeper into this concept of bad leadership. In essence, what we discovered is this. We discovered the reason why people leave jobs, or one of the reasons why these participants say they leave jobs, most of them, is because of bad leadership, which lets me understand something. Number one, leadership matters. There was actually a study at Harvard University several years ago that I share in certain presentations. And one of the things they discovered, they said that 80% believe that the state of a nation or a community is dependent upon leadership. In essence, the state of a community, the state of a nation, or even the state of the world all comes down to this concept of leadership. What's even more fascinating is this, that if you don't possess the right leadership characteristics, or in essence, the right leadership style, it can have a negative impact on retention, engagement, and development. In essence, you can Google right now leadership, and you'll see a variety of different definitions of leadership. You'll see a variety of different leadership styles. You'll see a variety of different characteristics and traits of leadership. When I did my study and I did my research and my dissertation, there were three specific aspects of leadership that are so incredibly important that I believe not only should it be taught from top, but all the way down. And I'm going to give you what they are. The first one is the transformational leadership model. I found in my dissertation, talk about it in my book, that the transformational leadership model has a positive correlation with the retention of individuals of the millennial generation. Specifically, I would go so far to say culturally diverse millennials and members of Generation Z. Number two, another one is servant leadership. This heart to serve, this heart to develop, this heart to coach, this heart that cares, this heart that's compassionate, this heart that wants to see people grow and reach their fullest potential. And the last one is inclusive leadership. In essence, leading from an inclusive lens of leadership. In essence, I even like to go a little step farther. I call another concept I use called equity-minded leadership. That's a new concept I like to include as well. But ultimately, not only is it important that you have effective leadership skills, but you know how to do it with what I call an inclusive or equity-minded mindset or lens as a leader. These are three leadership styles, characteristics that I believe every leader needs to be trained in order to be effective at increasing the retention, the engagement, and development, not only of leaders in general, but as it relates to this conversation, specifically culturally diverse leaders of the emerging generation. And what's so fascinating about this concept is even when I was doing my research and I was doing my dissertation, I came across a study by an organization called Culture Amp. They do some incredible work, and they were doing this study on retention. And in this study, they discovered that 11% left the organization because of pay, 12% because of manager, here it comes, but 28% left because of leadership. In essence, if we have bad, ineffective, failing leadership, people don't want to go. And again, as I shared so many times, when we deal with this, the great awakening, as far as people leaving their jobs, the reason they're leaving is not only because of a lack of professional and development opportunities or access to greater opportunities, but they're leaving because of their leader. They're leaving because they have bad leadership. They have leadership that doesn't hear them. They have leadership that doesn't care about them. They have flat leadership that doesn't even know how to lead. So in this conversation, when we start dealing with retention and engagement and development of leaders, not only are the first three questions and reflections important, but this leadership concept is important as well. We have to make sure that we are not only creating leadership programs, but we're developing the right leadership skills in order to be effective during these times. You know, there's a question that came up when I was doing this program, and one of the questions said, how do you prepare students that are coming out of this COVID-19 pandemic? And I don't know if we come out of it yet, but this was the question. One of the things that I explained to them, I said, well, in the midst of all the challenges, there are some lessons that have been learned that are not going away. One lesson we know is sure is how to lead virtually or how to lead hybrid teams. That's not going away. That's a skill set that we learned. It came out of nowhere, but it's one you want to take after the COVID-19 pandemic. Number two, adaptability. Adaptability has been here, it's still here, and it's more effective than ever before. It's not going away. You better learn how to adapt. You better how to lead during times of change. Number three, resilience. It's been here, it's still here, and it's going to be needed down the line. People need to know how to be resilient. And the fourth one, self-care. People need to know how to take care of themselves. If there's anything we learn through this COVID-19 pandemic, is it's self-care, making sure that we're good spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. All that. Now, these are some stuff that became intensified in COVID that are even more important as we move out of COVID and we're moving forward. So in essence, these are leadership skills. These are behaviors. These are characteristics that matter when it comes to retention, engagement, and developing the next generation of leaders. So I would encourage people to understand that if I'm going to be effective at retaining, engaging, and developing the next generation of leaders, I got to make sure that not only am I an effective leader, but everyone that works with me is developing the right leadership skills as well. Man, this fires me up. And you say, Dr. J, how do I do that? Real simple. Number one, identify the qualities of leadership that are aligned with the transformational leadership model, servant leadership, and inclusive leadership. There's specific traits, there's specific skill sets, there's specific lessons. Literally, if you're over a leadership development program, you could probably do a 3-year program on these 3 aspects of leadership. Literally 3 years. You can literally get that much out of it and then prepare your professional and leadership team to really transform the world. Number 2, we have to train. We got to have leadership development training. We got to train, right? We got to train, but we want to make sure we have the right skills. Make sure we're doing the right things. And this doesn't mean just surveying the students you're dealing with, but it also means you're looking at the landscape. You're looking at culture, looking at the trends, you're looking at what has happened. If you're not changing your leadership development programming after COVID-19, then as a leadership educator, I would go as far as say you probably missed it, because there's some new things we need to implement into our leadership programs that we may have not implemented before. After the George Floyd, if you're not making some adjustment to your leadership programming, you probably are missing it, because there's some things we got to change just based on culture and society, and stuff changes and stuff evolves. One of the things I tell people all the time, we've been doing the Circular Change Leadership Experience literally for 12 years. And each year we try to add something different. We try to make some differences and some new things. And I can tell you one thing, and I'm going to share this later. There's another thing that I identified in this study that I'm going to bring out later as it relates to careers. We're going to implement that into our next conference, because it's something that's so needed with students and really young professionals all across the country. And the last one, we got to keep them accountable. We've talked about that. There's got to be accountability. There's got to be accountability of leadership. There's got to be accountability as far as those that are in leadership. Now, these are the 4 things that we discussed up to this point. And now for these last 2 minutes, as we get ready to close, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close with what I call rapid fire. When we did this program, there were a variety of questions that many of you asked, and there were a couple other trends I want to share with you as well. So I'm going to go through this as quick as possible in this next minute. The first thing is this, a question that I didn't go too deep into is, I asked, when it comes to the workplace, what do you desire? In person, virtual, or hybrid? The number one most important thing that was in my study was a hybrid workflow. So ultimately, members of this generation, not only they want to be in the office, but they also want to be out the office as well. The second thing I asked was in relation to communication. What communication style do you desire the most? Is it social media? Is it texting? Is it face-to-face? Is it phone? Or is it email? Surprisingly, face-to-face was still number one. Most individuals in my study prefer face-to-face communication the most. The next one is a question that came, and they said, what is the false assumption that you identified with Gen Z? Well, one false assumption is this, is that they don't like to talk face-to-face. Absolutely false. I saw it when I did an experiment in Hawaii. I've also saw it in my study. Face-to-face still matters. Students, professionals of the younger generation, as much as they use technology, face-to-face still matters. Next question that came in is, how do you gather information? How do you reach this audience? Now, obviously, we know that they're online more than ever. I remember 7 years ago, I was doing a research on millennials, and they said that literally 33% of a millennial's life will be online. So obviously, being online is a way to reach them as well as in person. Something I want to shout out that I think is important is YouTube. Studies have found with Gen Z that YouTube is one of the top social media platforms that they're going to. So YouTube is really important. How to do things, how to get advice. YouTube is huge. The next thing is, when it comes to workplace shifts, what are some workplace shifts that you expect? Well, number one is diversity. I expect that this emerging generation is going to expect diversity and representation in leadership positions. They're going to be asking themselves the question, are there VPs that look like me? Are there presidents that look like me? Are there supervisors that look like me? Are there directors? That's going to be important. Another one is social issues. Dismantling racism is going to be a big issue. Homelessness and a variety of other issues are going to be important when it comes to ultimately participating or becoming part of a workplace. The fourth thing is learning styles. What are some learning styles? Now, I share this in my public speaking virtual master classes. When I actually started with Gen X and the younger millennials. And I remember I started as a lecturer. So I was a lecturer. I was that person, I had the energy. I was talking. I didn't have no PowerPoint. But as I began to grow, I began to realize that there's a lot of visual learners. And I embedded the PowerPoint presentation because I realized the importance of PowerPoint. But one of the things I discovered with this next generation of college students is what I call experiential learning, activities, interaction, engagement. That's even more important now than before. So now when you hear me speak, I'm not only speaking visual, but I'm thinking about activities and things that I can do because I realize this is critical when you're teaching, when you're empowering or developing the next generation of leaders. The next thing is COVID-19. What are some lessons that were learned? I talked about that. The next thing were for first year students. When someone is beginning school, what would you have them to learn? And this is what I would say. I would say number one, self-awareness. Self-awareness. I went to a conference in Mississippi State, and it's called the Spark Conference. And I used the acronym, how to find your spark. And I talked about your set of values. I talked about your talents, your strengths, which by the way, can be different. I talked about your why. I talked about your personality type. I talked about your story. And then how do you create all of that to determine the career path that is best for you? And then what are some common values? Well, there's meaning is going to matter, impact, inclusion, and community. All of these are common values that matter. So I hope that I was able to very quickly answer some of the questions that I saw that came in, and also to highlight the two other questions that I asked in my survey as it related to hybrid and face-to-face. The other one, which I'm going to talk about in another article coming soon, is when it comes to jobs. Where do people look most for jobs? Number one was job boards. Number two was LinkedIn. What was lowest was relationships, and that's a big deal. And I'm going to talk about that later in the future. But ultimately, this is the end of this presentation. I want to just first of all personally thank all of you that have taken the time out of your schedule to be with me this long. We have been here for almost an hour and a half, and again, I had an incredibly awesome time sharing this information with you. And as I said with you earlier, we have great challenges that are happening right now around retention, engagement, and development of more culturally diverse leaders of the millennial and Gen Z generation. There's a great awakening of people leaving their jobs. But one thing I know, no matter how big the problem, no matter how big the challenge, there are some solutions. And I believe some of the information I share with you today can be implemented and can help you to become more effective at retaining, engaging, and most importantly, from my heart, developing the next generation of culturally diverse leaders of the millennial and Gen Z generation. I want to thank you all so much again for being with me. I'm definitely going to be sending you a follow-up email. Look out for my email over the next couple of days. What you're going to get, number one, you're going to get the book. Number two, you're going to get the access to the Inclusive Leadership e-learning course. And then number three, once this recording is edited, you're going to get that information as well. So again, I want to thank you all so much. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for being a part of the program. Have an incredible rest of the week. And again, stay on the lookout. We're going to have some more virtual math classes coming up. Back to our panel sessions as we lead toward the end of this year. So look forward to seeing y'all. Thank you again for the support. Have an incredible rest of the night. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Peace.